Wyoming Territory, May 1872. The smoke was still rising when Quillan Zane pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of what used to be the Holloway homestead. He could smell it before he saw it: burnt timber, scorched earth, and something worse. The barn was blackened to a skeleton, the roof of the house had caved in, and the fields were trampled flat by hooves. It had been a raid, fast and brutal. He had seen the signs before. Years of driving cattle and delivering supplies to outposts had shown him enough. But this was different. This had been a home. Quillan dismounted, boots crunching over charred debris. "Hello," he called out, his voice low but steady. "Anyone left?" A soft sound answered him, a cough, brittle and dry. He turned fast, hand on the butt of his pistol, but what stepped into view made his breath catch. A woman. Barefoot, her dress torn and sooty, face streaked with ash. Her long dark hair had come loose, tangled over her shoulders, and her brown eyes were wide with shock. She held onto the splintered doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I am not armed," she said, voice hoarse. "I am not here to hurt you," Quillan said gently, lifting both hands. "My name's Quillan Zane. I have a cabin north of here. I saw the smoke." She blinked, and then her knees buckled. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and caught her before she hit the ground. "I lost everything," she whispered against his shirt. "They burned it all." "I know," he said softly. He lifted her carefully and carried her to his horse. She did not resist, only leaned into him like she had nothing else left. And maybe she didn't. "Do you have a name?" he asked. "Zadie," she said after a pause. "Zadie Holloway?" He nodded once. "You were coming with me, Zadie Holloway?" He rode slowly, holding her steady in front of him as his horse picked its way north. She stayed quiet, but her hands clutched his coat, knuckles white, and once or twice he felt her tremble. The ride took over an hour. When his log cabin came into view, tucked against the tree line and sheltered by a rocky ridge, she whispered something too quiet to hear. He helped her down and opened the door. Inside was warm from the morning's fire. He set her on the chair by the hearth and knelt to add more wood. "I have not much, but it is safe here," he told her. She nodded, eyes scanning the space. 1 room, simple but solid. A bed in one corner, a table, shelves with supplies, a rifle by the door. "I will sleep on the floor," he added quickly. "You take the bed." "I do not care where I sleep," Zadie said quietly. "I just need somewhere to be." He brought her water and a blanket, and she wrapped herself up without a word. Her hands were scratched, her lips split, and there was a bruise blooming along her collarbone. Quillan sat across from her, not speaking. He had learned long ago that not all wounds could be talked through. Some needed time, space. But as the minutes passed, she shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. "They came before dawn," she said. "I heard the horses. My father tried to fight them. My mother," her voice cracked. "I am sorry," he said. He meant it. "I ran into the cellar with my brother's little boy," she continued, her voice shaking now. "Tobias. He is 4. I told him to be quiet. He was so scared." Quillan leaned forward. "Where is he?" Her hands curled into fists. "They took him." Quillan's jaw tightened. "They took him," she repeated, eyes wild now. "I could not stop them," he was crying, "and I tried. "We will get him back," Quillan said firmly. Zadie looked at him like he had said something impossible. "You do not even know me." "I know you lost everything," he said. "That is enough." She stared back at him, throat working. "I tracked raiders before," he added. "If we leave at first light, their trail will still be fresh." Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. "You would do that? Risk yourself for me?" "I do not leave people behind," he said. Zadie looked down at her hands. "Neither do I." They left before the sun crested the peaks. Quillan rode ahead, rifle across his back, and Zadie followed on his second horse. She had washed and braided her hair, and though her dress was still torn at the hem, she rode with her spine straight and her jaw set. They followed the trail south, hoofprints and broken brush, signs of a fast-moving group. By midday, Quillan spotted smoke curling above the trees. "There," he said, pointing. They dismounted and crept closer through the underbrush. A small camp, 4 men, 1 boy tied near a wagon. "Tobias." Zadie reached for Quillan's arm, gripping it hard. "That is him." I see him, he said. Stay low. He circled wide, silent on his feet, and took position behind a cluster of rocks. One man wandered off to relieve himself, and Quillan moved fast. A crack of his rifle dropped the man before he could shout. The other three ran for their weapons, but Quillan was already on them. One he knocked cold with the butt of his rifle. Another slashed at him with a knife, but Quillan dodged and drove his elbow into the man's jaw. The last one tried to flee, but Zadie stepped from the trees with a pistol she had taken from the wagon and fired once. The man dropped. Quillan stared at her, breathing hard. She lowered the gun slowly, hands shaking. I had to, she whispered. For Tobias. He nodded once. Then he ran to the boy and cut his bindings. Tobias? Zadie gasped as she pulled him into her arms. It is me, sweetheart. It is Aunt Zadie. The boy clung to her, crying. Quillan watched them, chest tight. The way she held the child, the way she kept whispering his name like it was the only thing that mattered. There was something in that moment that settled in his gut like a weight, like the start of something he had not expected. They rode back slow, Tobias between them, tucked safe in Quillan's coat. Zadie held onto the boy and kept glancing at Quillan, eyes softer now. That night, as the fire crackled low and Tobias slept curled beside the hearth, Zadie sat beside Quillan on the wooden floor. You saved him, she said quietly. You did, he corrected. You acted when it mattered. She looked at him, her face lit golden by the fire. I do not think I could have done it without you. He looked back at her. You will not have to do anything alone anymore. They sat in silence after that, but it was not empty. It was full of something warm and new, something steady. And outside, the wind moved gently through the pines, like the world itself was sighing in relief. Morning came slow and pale, the kind that seeped through the pines without hurry. The boy was still wrapped in Quillan's coat, curled on the pallet near the hearth. Zadie stood just outside the cabin door, arms folded tight against the cold, watching the sun lift over the ridge. Her braid was loose from sleep, a few strands caught in the breeze. Quillan stepped up beside her, his coat pulled over his shirt, the steam from the tin cup in his hand rising steady. He slept through, he said, glancing toward the open door behind them. Zadie nodded. He didn't cry once. You got a strong one on your hands. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers rubbed the edge of her sleeve, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. He never asked for his parents, she said after a moment. Not once. I don't think he understands they're gone. She didn't cry, but her voice pulled thin at the edges. That'll come, Quillan said. He's still holding on to what's in front of him. Zadie looked at him then. Really looked. You been around children before? He sipped from the cup before answering. Had a sister once. She raised 4 boys. I helped out some back in Texas. She gave a small nod and looked back toward the trees, quiet again. I need to do something, she said. I can't just sit here, waiting for the next bad thing to come. You're not, he said. Waiting, I mean, you got a boy to raise now. But I've got no land, no income, no name a man would want to tie himself to. Quillan's jaw shifted. You think that's what you need right now? A man? I think that's what the world expects. A woman alone with a child and no dowry. People start deciding things for her. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched a crow lift from the treetops, wings cutting clean through the morning air. There's a plot 2 miles west. Used to belong to Jeb Nolan. He passed last spring, no kin to speak of. Property's been sitting quiet since. Zadie turned to him. You saying I could take it? I'm saying I know the land agent in Laramie. I could take you to file a claim, if you're set on staying. She studied him. Why help me? You've done more already than most would. Quillan's gaze didn't waver. Because I want to. Because you didn't break when you had cause to. And because that boy trusts you like roots trust soil. Her throat moved as she swallowed. I'd need a cart, tools, seed. I've got most of that. And what I don't, we can trade for. She looked away again, blinking hard. I don't know how to repay you. I'm not asking for repayment, but I want to give something back. He hesitated, then said quietly, help me fix the fence come spring. It's been sagging near the creek. That pulled a breath of relief from her. That I can do. Later that day, they worked side by side. She chopped onions while he cleaned the rifle, both of them moving with the easy rhythm of people who didn't need to fill silence to feel safe. Tobias sat at the table, drawing in the soot on the wood with his fingertip, humming something soft. Zadie looked over at him and smiled. Just a little. He's quieter now, she said. More settled. He's watching you, Quillan said. You hold steady, he'll follow your lead. She looked at Quillan. I don't know if I'm steady. I feel like I'm walking on creek ice. You're standing, he said. That's enough. Something in her face shifted, then not a smile, but something close. She turned back to the onions, knife moving slow and even. That evening, after Tobias had been tucked in with a folded quilt and a warm stone at his feet, Zadie sat beside the fire, her legs pulled up beneath her. I was promised once, she said, staring into the flames. Before the war ended, he didn't make it back. Quillan didn't speak, just let the crackle of the fire fill the space between them. I kept waiting, she continued, even after the letters stopped. Thought maybe he'd come walking up the road one day. Foolish. Not foolish, Quillan said. Just hopeful. She looked over at him. You ever been wed? No, anyone waiting on you? His mouth twitched. Not anymore. She nodded like she understood the shape of that answer without needing it spoken in full. What kind of life did you think you'd have? She asked. Quiet one, he said. Land of my own. Someone to build it with. She looked around the cabin, then back at him. You've got the land. He met her eyes. Still missing the other part. Zadie didn't look away this time. Maybe you're not anymore. They didn't speak again that night. But when she rose to tend the fire before bed, her hand brushed his where it rested on the floor, and neither of them pulled away. Outside, the wind had quieted. Snow would come soon, but for now, the woods held still, as if listening. The ground had hardened overnight, rimmed with frost that clung to the grass like lace. Zadie stood over the wooden trough with a pail in hand, dipping water from the creek. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, and her breath came out in visible puffs. Tobias sat near the cabin door, bundled in a wool coat Quillan had once worn himself. He was stacking twigs, his brow furrowed in concentration. Quillan leaned against the shed wall, sharpening a draw knife. The rasp of steel against stone was steady, measured. He watched Zadie wipe her hands on her skirt before crouching beside the boy. You stack them like a log wall, not a tower. See, she said, guiding his small hands. Tobias adjusted the sticks as she showed him, then gave a small nod. You teach him well, Quillan said, setting the draw knife aside. Zadie straightened without turning. He learns fast. Always did. Quillan stepped forward, brushing sawdust from his palms. I'll ride into Laramie tomorrow. Weather's holding, and I've got to see the land agent before snow makes the pass worse. She stood, brushing her skirt flat. I'll come. He hesitated. You sure? It's a long ride. I don't want you speaking for me. I want to sign the claim myself. He nodded. We'll need someone to watch Tobias. She looked toward the pines. Mrs. Danner has that place east of the ridge. She lost a son in the war. Keeps to herself, but she's kind. I'll ride by her place tonight. Ask if she'll keep him for the day. Zadie nodded, then added, I'll sew her mending in return. I saw her laundry line, half her shirts are missing buttons. Quillan raised an eyebrow. You always bargain in thread? She met his glance. It's what I've got. As dusk settled, Quillan rode out toward the Danner place. When he returned, he found the cabin warm with lamplight and the scent of something baking low and slow. Zadie sat at the table mending a ripped saddlebag. Her hands worked neat stitches into the leather, and her eyes flicked up when he stepped in. She said yes, he said, hanging his coat. Tobias will stay with her and her goats. She'll feed him and see him warm. Zadie nodded. Thank you. He watched her work for a moment. You always this sure of yourself? She didn't look up. No, but I've learned to act like I am when it matters. He moved to the hearth, crouched, and stirred the embers. I'll pack provisions tonight. We leave early. In the gray before dawn, they left Tobias bundled in Mrs. Danner's shawl and rode south. The road to Laramie was rutted and cold, but the sky was clear. As they passed a frozen creek, Quillan glanced over. You ever filed a land claim before? Zadie shook her head. I've stitched enough deeds into coat linings to know what one looks like. But no, this will be the first with my name on it. Feels different when it's yours. She looked ahead. I want something that can't be taken from me. Not by fire, not by men with guns. He nodded. That's land. But it's also people. If they're the right kind. They rode in silence for a time. Then she asked, what made you settle here? Too many years drifting. Thought I'd see what it felt like to stay. You always live alone? I did. Until you and the boy showed up. She didn't answer, but her shoulders softened. Laramie was busy with traders and wagons by the time they tied off at the post. Inside the land office, the clerk took one look at Zadie and squinted. You claiming for your husband? I'm claiming for myself, she said plainly, handing over the form. The clerk blinked. You sure you want Nolan's place? No one's touched that land since last spring. Soil's rough, fence is worse. I'm sure. He grunted and passed her the pen. Quillan watched her from the doorway. She signed with a steady hand, her eyes fixed on the paper like it was a promise. Outside, the wind had picked up. They mounted and rode north again, the sky streaked with late light. Halfway home, they stopped beside a narrow stream, letting the horses drink. Zadie crouched, rubbing her hands together. Quillan handed her a strip of jerky. You've got your land. She chewed quietly, then said, and I've got 2 hands, a boy to look after, and a winter coming quick. You've also got a neighbor who knows how to build and plow. She looked up at him. You offering more than help? He met her eyes. I'm saying I don't want to ride back to an empty cabin if I can help it. Her voice was low. You think there's room for us in it? There's room, he said. If you want it. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. If I say yes, it's not out of need. I can manage alone if I have to. I know you can. But I don't want to. Not anymore. He stepped closer. Neither do I. They didn't touch, didn't kiss. But the silence between them was full, like the first breath after a storm. By the time they reached the cabin, the light had gone soft and amber. Tobias was asleep in Mrs. Danner's shawl, clutching a wooden horse someone had whittled for him. Zadie lifted him gently. Quillan opened the door. Inside, the fire waited, warm and steady. A place to begin. The first snow came at dusk, quiet as breath. Thin flakes drifted down through the pine boughs, catching in the folds of Zadie's shawl as she stepped outside to bring in the last of the firewood. Her gloves were stiff with cold, and her fingers ached by the time she latched the door behind her. Inside, the warmth reached her slowly. Tobias sat at the table, tongue between his teeth as he moved the wooden horse across the plank surface. Quillan was by the hearth, fitting another iron hook to the beam above the fire. He glanced over his shoulder when Zadie shook the snow from her hem. Storm's easing in, he said. Could be deep by morning. She set the wood near the stove. I brought an extra kindling. That should hold us a few days. He nodded, tightening the hook with a short twist of his wrist. I'll string more line for drying clothes. If we're snowed in, we'll have to keep ahead of the damp. Zadie pulled Tobias's coat from the peg and began brushing the last bits of frost from its sleeves. You ever trap? She asked. Quillan's brow rose. Fox and mink, mostly. Why? She folded the coat and laid it across the bench. I was thinking we could set snares near the ridge. If winter stretches long, we'll need more than dry beans. He gave a quiet sound of agreement. I've got wire and old bait tins in the shed. We'll check the traps together come morning. Tobias looked up. Can I go too? Zadie ruffled his hair. Not if it's too deep to walk. But we'll bring you back something to see, if we catch it. As night pressed in, the wind shifted, low and steady against the walls. They ate by lamplight flatbread and turnips fried in lard, then cleared the dishes as the storm grew louder outside. Zadie lingered with her hands in the dish basin longer than needed, sleeves damp at the cuffs. Quillan dried the plates with slow movements, watching her. You always this ready for hard weather? he asked. She glanced at him. My mother believed in preparing for everything. She kept dried apples under the floorboards and salt in cloth sacks near the stove. Said the world could change overnight. She was right about that. Zadie turned from the basin, drying her hands on her apron. I keep thinking about how many days I wasted waiting for life to settle itself. Quillan set the last plate on the shelf. What would you do different? I'd stop waiting, she said. I'd build what I want with whoever's willing to build it with me. He stepped closer. I'm willing. She didn't move away. I know. He took her hands, the backs of them still cool from the water. We could make it official, Zadie. There's a circuit judge in Rawlins. He comes through once a month. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. You'd want that? With me. I want what we've already started. I want to stand beside you, not just near. Her eyes searched his face, slow and careful. I'd need time to sew a proper dress. And we'd have to find a way to tell Tobias. We'll ride to town together. Take what time you need. She nodded, voice low. Then yes, I want that too. Outside, the wind shifted again, pushing snow against the windows in soft waves. Tobias had fallen asleep by the hearth, curled in a quilt with the wooden horse cradle beneath his chin. Quillan stoked the fire and pulled another blanket over the boy. Zadie watched them both with a quietness that had nothing to do with silence. Later, with the storm steady outside and the night deepening, she stood at the cabin window watching the flakes thicken. Quillan joined her, his hand brushing hers where it rested on the sill. What are you thinking? He asked. That I spent so long trying to hold on to what was gone, she said. I never thought I'd be standing here, planning a life with someone who looks me in the eye and stays. He didn't answer, only took her hand in his, their fingers curling together without urgency. The snow kept falling, and the fire burned low, and neither of them let go. The cabin smelled of pine pitch and rising bread. Zadie stood near the hearth, brushing flour from her wrists as the heat swelled inside the stove beside her. A pair of wool socks dried on the line above the fire, and a clean shirt hung beside them, stiff from washing. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving everything glazed and silent beneath a pale sky. Quillan came in from the shed with a bundle of pelts over one shoulder. The cold clung to him, sharp and clean, and his boots left melting prints across the floorboards. He set the pelts on the bench and shook out his coat. Trap run went better than I expected, he said. 2 snowshoe hares and a fox. Zadie eyed the fur. We'll get a fair price for those come thaw. He moved to the basin to wash, sleeves already rolled. We could trade for a better plow blade. The one I've got won't hold through spring. She opened the stove door and checked the loaf. I was thinking about that. The Danner woman said her cousin in Elk Fork forges tools. Might be worth the trip. Quillan scrubbed his hands and dried them on a linen cloth. We'll need to go before the snows start melting. River crossings'll be worse then. We'll wait until Tobias is settled with her again. I don't want him riding through deep water. Quillan leaned against the wall, watching her. You always think 3 steps ahead. I have to, she said. It's how I keep you 2 fed. He smiled, slow and easy. I've never eaten this steady in my life. She dusted her hands on her apron and turned to face him. I've been meaning to ask you something. He straightened. Go on. There's a small corner of that Nolan land, near the edge of the woods. It's flat, clear. I'd like to plant something more than food there. What are you thinking? Flowers, she said. My mother used to keep a row of hollyhocks. She said beauty's not a luxury if it keeps your soul from drying out. Quillan's eyes warmed. You plant them. I'll build a fence to keep the deer off. She stepped closer, tilting her head. You sure you don't mind building fences for dreams? I'd rather build for that than anything else. She reached for his hand, fingers fitting into his without hesitation. You're not the sort I ever expected to find. He held her gaze. You're the only one I ever hoped might stay. They stood there a long moment, heat from the stove wrapping around them, the quiet in the cabin full not with absence, but with the weight of something steady and whole. Later that week, they rode together to Rawlins. Tobias stayed with Mrs. Danner, who gave them a tin of sugar biscuits for the trail. The sky was overcast, but the weather held and the roads were firm. They rode side by side, sharing the silence like a woven thread between them. The judge wore a long coat and spectacles, his fingers ink-stained from a morning of documents. He looked between them only once before nodding and pulling out the license forms. Zadie signed first, her name written without hesitation. Quillan followed, his script slow but sure. They married in the back room of the general store with the storekeeper's wife as witness and the scent of kerosene and cinnamon in the air. There was no music, no crowd, just the soft murmur of vows and the brief joining of hands. When the judge stepped back and gave a nod, Quillan lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. They rode home as the light faded gold behind them, the trail familiar, the future spread out like the unbroken snow. At the cabin, Tobias ran out when he saw them, arms reaching. Zadie lifted him from the ground, her cheek pressed against his hair. "Did you bring me anything?" he asked. Quillan reached into his coat and pulled out a wooden whistle. "Carved it on the way back." Tobias grinned and blew into it, the sharp note cutting across the yard. That night, after supper, they sat by the fire. Tobias curled up on his pallet, the whistle beside him. Zadie sat on the floor with her back against Quillan's knees. His hands rested on her shoulders, his thumb brushing the curve of her collarbone. "I never pictured this," she said quietly. "Not in all the empty places I've been." He leaned down, voice low. "You're not in one now." Spring came late that year, slow in arriving but soft in its promise. The river swelled and receded. The ground warmed. Zadie planted her rose potato, onion, beans. And in the flat corner near the trees, she sowed seeds for hollyhocks, their dark centers marked by stones so Tobias wouldn't trample them. Quillan built the fence as promised, splitting rails with care. When the rains came, he patched the roof and Zadie made preserves. They traded pelts and tools for sugar, nails, and a copper kettle. The cabin grew fuller, not crowded, just lived in. By midsummer, the hollyhocks rose tall and wild, pink and red and purple against the green. Tobias ran between them with a stick for a sword, his laugh echoing through the trees. One evening, Zadie stood on the porch, apron tied low, her hands resting on the rail. Quillan came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. "He's growing fast," he said into her hair. "He'll be tall like you." They stood there watching the boy chase fireflies, the fields golden in the last light. "I used to think peace was something that passed you by," she said. "Something you missed if you weren't quick enough." Quillan pressed his cheek to hers. "You didn't miss it." "No," she said, turning toward him, her voice soft and steady. "I didn't." In the late summer heat, with the fields stretching wide and the house warm with the scent of harvest, they lay in bed with the windows open. Tobias slept in the next room, the night air sweet with pine and clover. Zadie reached for Quillan's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I used to wonder if I'd ever belong anywhere," she said. He kissed her temple, slow and sure. "You do now." She closed her eyes, her heart full in a way she hadn't imagined possible. And in the quiet of that room, with nothing left to run from and everything ahead to build, they slept in each other's arms, the world outside still and whole.